there's probably no more a discussion topic that is very important and people are just, completely stressed out about is dementia, whether it be thinking about your own future or your loved ones, or you're in a caregiving situation. These discussions that we have centered around dementia are very engaging, and I always walk away with some great bits of information that I can help other people with. I'm thrilled today to have Pam Ostrowski, who is the author of It's Not That Simple, Helping Families Navigate the Alzheimer's Journey. There you go, Pam. And I like all the sticky notes too. We're gonna talk about her book. We're gonna talk about the challenge of dementia, and we're gonna respond to what you in the audience want us to talk about. So Pam, I'm really psyched to have you. I forget how our paths crossed, but when I saw your book, I was sort of like, oh, I really hope I can get her on, because I think this is going to really be a stimulating discussion. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to writing this book.
Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you so much for having me today as your guest. And I think I actually found out about you through a Google search looking for resources. So the proactive and the positive aging source book is such a wonderful resource. So I thought, we should connect. And so thank you so much for inviting me on to the podcast. As far as my background goes, I was merrily going along in life as the daughter of a retired lieutenant colonel and a homemaker, and both of them were very busy people, had very good memories, by the way. And then I was in high tech and I was flying around the world. And then one Christmas, I came home and noticed that mom was showing signs of unreasonable anxiety. And so that started the journey of moving them out to Phoenix from New Hampshire, because I was worried about her symptoms. And I knew that my dad didn't see it, because the people who are closest to your loved one tend to not see the symptoms, or there's a shield, right? And also the early stages of mild cognitive impairment. People learn how to fake it, if for lack of a better word. So that was really when I started to get more and more involved. I went to all the doctor's appointments so that I would make sure that I understood what was going on. That concept of redundancy and redundant care. In other words, you may think that you can take care of your spouse or your parent, but doing it alone puts you at risk, because ultimately, if something happened to you, or if you don't have any help, then that's where you run into problems. And so really that whole 14-year journey, because mom had Alzheimer's, dementia, and then Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. And then dad had dementia the last 3 years. So I was coordinating two entirely different types of dementia during that 14 years. And the only thing I could think of, Steve, was, oh my gosh, I need a book. I need something that will guide me through where I'm at. What questions do I need to be asking? What do I need to do? Who do I need to involve? Who's on my care team? And then what's going to happen in the future? What's that going to look like? And how do I cope with that? And how do I manage it? So that's why I wrote It's Not That Simple, Helping Families Navigate the Alzheimer's Journey.
I love it. Well, let's jump right into that book. What is that journey? What does that look like? And can you share the contents of your book and what? Oh, here we go. See, folks, this is like what magic happens when you've got a guest who is from the high-tech world. She is very prepared here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So this is basically what I call the 8 stepping stones of the dementia journey. And this is really what I coach families about. And so That very first one is really, is it dementia or is it Alzheimer's? Well, people get them confused. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. Then we talk about, how do you have conversations as a family or amongst close friends and family about, what if this happens? How are we going to be prepared? The difference in this disease versus other diseases is that if you had cancer or a heart attack or a stroke, the person typically is pretty functional mentally, cognitively. They can either write or they can speak. With dementia, the most important thing that we rely on in communication, which is our memories and our speaking capability, go away. And that's the one reason why you have to have a plan. And so this 8 stepping stones really walks you through what that can look like and allow you as the individual who potentially could get dementia, or while your loved one is still cognitively capable, to walk through these and say, well, what would you want? And this is a format that you can use that for, so that you can use this as a conversation, a path or a template. And so what if you have a spouse and you have different care needs? What are the care options out there? Everybody calls the senior living communities homes. Well, no, that term is for nursing homes. It has nothing to do with what a person with dementia, what type of skills and activities they need. So we've got a really big problem with language. So the book talks about what language to use. And people broad brush and generalize. And that's part of where that stigma comes from that you and I were talking about earlier. And then, of course, building a care team, the emotional roller coaster, how to communicate with someone with dementia, because they struggle with words and repeating it and saying it louder. Neither one of those work. All it does is make you frustrated and make them frustrated. And the number one thing that people with dementia remember is emotions. So if you get frustrated and angry, they blame themselves and they internalize that. We don't want that. So the book talks through how to appropriately communicate with someone with mild cognitive impairment or some form of dementia. And then how do you visit? So if they are in a care community or a care home, how do you communicate with them? What types of things do you do with them when you visit? You would think that would be easy, but it's not. It is not an inherent skill set that we have. And then finally, when the end is near. Now, I know there's 9 there, but when the end is near, I just kind of wanted to prepare you for what that's going to be like. So it's really not one of the 8 stepping stones.
Well,
so that, Steve, is what's in.
Man, thank you for having that right there. And it looks like you probably are anticipating some of my questions here. So you've got different slides, which is great. But what a great platform, because I agree that the people that I talk to on a weekly basis, they want a guide of some sort, like something to follow, knowing they're going to get off track, but it's sort of everybody's thrown into this when they least expect it, like you were, and flying blind is just not acceptable, because they're not flying blind in their jobs and their daily lives and what have you. But so oftentimes when we're thrown into this caregiving role, we are.
Well, and it could be life or death, right? I mean, ultimately, and I do have a slide about denial, or, that hear no evil, see no evil, say no evil. It's if we can ignore the symptoms and ignore the situation and just think about it tomorrow, the Scarlett O'Hara philosophy. Yes, it's a difficult thing to look in the face, but when you look in the face of that, you've taken one step to make progress for your loved one, to not have that journey alone, because you can't stop this from happening. I mean, when you have that diagnosis.
Well, and we've got this is a perfect lead into the question that just came in from Melissa Hawkins. And she says, thank you for the session. I'm hoping you can talk a bit about those who are resistant to help support and receive treatment. My mom was recently diagnosed with mild dementia and is resisting every step of the way. Any words of wisdom for Melissa and the many other folks that can be in a similar situation?
Absolutely. And thank you, Melissa, for your question. one of the things, the reason why I have slides is to help you screen capture, if you'd like, some of the things that that I predict you might be asking, because I went through this personally for 14 years. And so when it's not unusual for you to have loved ones who just don't want to look at this, especially if you have family members. So with my two brothers, they kind of stayed in the background, and I used their skill sets for my dad primarily, not my mom, because the boys always were able to handle dad differently. I couldn't. And so for handling the avoidance and the challenges, as far as when do you start the conversations, how do you know when it's time to change living arrangements, what words do you use in this conversation? That's all part of what's in the book. And this resistance is also part of what's in the book. But one of the biggest things that scares me about not accepting this is that we have this, I've got this mentality. It can't be that bad. Well, if you talk to anybody who's a caregiver at home with someone with dementia, all you have to do is go look on Facebook, and there's tons of very sad stories. So understanding the ramifications, which is the topic of today's conversation, is the impact. If you want to be a caregiver, or you assume you're going to be a caregiver, are you willing to give up your job? And, you know, is your home prepared? Because a person should be on the first floor. You shouldn't have them climbing stairs, especially because a majority, so 1 out of 9 people over the age of 65 have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And that's as of 2021. And so as we age, all of the baby boomers will be 65 or over by 2029. So as we age, are our homes prepared, right? Whether we're the caregiver or we're a spouse at caregiver. And so how will you keep these individuals safe? One of the things that we have to keep in mind, Steve, is that with dementia, it's a 24/7 eyes on type of disease. So the reason why people have memory care and have these conversations is because these individuals, if they are not stimulated and get enough exercise and get tired out, they tend to wander at night. They call that sundowning. So in trying to help your family members, having this conversation, helping them understand the long-term behaviors, which is why I wrote the book, the long-term challenges you're going to face, and say, okay, this journey is going to happen whether we're on the train or not. Do we want to support our loved one? Do we want them to take this journey alone and be scared and sad and frustrated all on their own? Probably not.
Yeah, no, great words of wisdom there. And getting a lot of affirmation comments that I see in chat. GJ Hodson says, we hear a lot about how dementia care can be isolating and divisive for friends, family, and even relationships. Where can care partners look to increase social support? Yeah, you know, what's interesting, there's a couple of things that you said, that, you know, in this COVID world, it used to be that, you know, you just stroll down to the local senior center and there'll be an Alzheimer's support group or dementia support group or something like that. I've received a lot of calls recently where folks are, you know, they may have tried out a Zoom support group, or they just really want to be face to face with somebody. But what are some ways that care partners can look to increase their social support?
Well, part of it is making sure that you're not the only person who's caring for your loved one with dementia. And I have a slide for this because I have a slide for everything. The impact to your own health, your loved one would never want you to sacrifice your life for theirs. What they want, and what we all try to provide to our loved ones, is the best care possible, so that you have peace of mind and no guilt or regret while also ensuring that they're happy and they're stimulated. So when I talk about stimulation, a lot of people say socialization. So what we want them to do is be engaged. So taking your loved one, or to a senior living or senior activity center. Please don't call it daycare. That's one of my pet peeves. It's not daycare. Those are for children. And the analogy of having a loved one with dementia who lived a full life and was productive and is still in there, and comparing them to a 3-year-old is really disrespectful. And so we don't want that. And so we want to put them in an environment where they can do stuff, do activities. It doesn't mean that they need to socialize. Some people love to socialize. Some people don't. Some people are introverts. And maybe they would like to do a puzzle on their own, or do another activity such as punching different buttons on the computer, or anything that engages the brain. And it really depends, and you have to ask these questions, and I'm happy to help you with this, is asking the activity center, what specific activities do you do that engage people? Because recall of memory versus learning are two different parts of the brain, as far as where you accumulate those and how you can help prolong your loved one's independence and prolong the level of cognitive ability that they have. So first piece of advice, get them to do something else besides hang around with you, because that's good for them. More importantly, it's also good for you, but it's important for them as well. So it's a win-win. As far as Zoom goes, so there's a great website called BrainHQ. That's .com.
Yeah, we've featured them on these discussions.
Oh, okay. So BrainHQ has you just basically log them into the site, and then they can play games. And the games are not like crossword puzzles or Sudoku. Those don't help with dementia. But the type of games that they have, they'll help the person learn, like, okay, I've got to learn a new rule. And then the games will, they'll feed you games based on your performance on the previous game. So it's really customized to your loved one's day, because in dementia, you have good days and bad days. I guess we all do, really. And so what you want to be able to do is engage that person mentally. So watching TV is out. Even doing a crossword puzzle, that's not, or a crossword puzzle or a jigsaw puzzle. A jigsaw puzzle can be too challenging, and it's also kind of a stagnating activity. So as far as you as a caregiver getting more more outside time, the flip side of letting them go out and get activities is to bring in a dementia certified caregiver. So in-home care with dementia certification. So I caution you to make sure that they're dementia certified. I've had too many horror stories with my clients, both in Arizona and in California and in Illinois and back east, that, oh, well, the person just sat there the entire time watching TV with my loved one. Yeah, that person is not the right person for someone with dementia. You want someone who's going to interact. Maybe they take them for a drive so they can look around, whatever it might be. They know the activities and how to treat some of the idiosyncrasies of dementia, which might be panic. It might be anxiety. It might be lots of the same question over and over again, which I know caregivers get tired of. So that would be some of the tips I have for those who are caring for a loved one with dementia, Steve.
And great. And then we've got, let's see, Michael Smith on in chat said, for social support and guidance through the Alzheimer's Association, he provided a link where there are support groups online and live. I'm dropping into chat, when you say certified caregivers, one of the organizations that I'm familiar with is the National Council on Certified Dementia.
Yes, CDP. I have that certification. Yes.
Okay. Are there some others that?
Yeah. So for caregivers, specifically for in-home care, so professional caregivers, not internal, but I would go with Teepa Snow. She is the gold standard for helping people understand how you care for a loved one with dementia. So she would be my first recommendation. The other thing to bear in mind with support groups is that not every support group is going to be the right one for you. So I am not a support group person. That I don't label myself as somebody who would ever go to a support group. And I have actually, aside from leading one, but I don't actually provide support. I provide answers. So my group in East Mesa is Dementia Q&A. And you have a question. I probably lived through it, as have some of the other people in the room. So it's about you ask the question, because a lot of times people who are living this tell really difficult stories and they go on and on and on, and then everybody leaves, but nobody's had a takeaway. And I believe, this is from my corporate background, when you go into a meeting, you come out with what it is that you need, an answer to move forward in your life, either for you to get peace of mind or to help your loved one, whatever that might be. But to just sit and talk about everybody's issues didn't feel productive enough to me. So make sure, and the Alzheimer's Association has some great support groups, as does the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. So and there's lots of resources out there, guys. You just need to know where to look. Just type it in. You should be able to find them. But the important thing here is search, check each one out, find the right one for you. Don't assume that a support group isn't the right thing for you. It might just be that support group isn't the right one for you.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with people that are resistant because they didn't connect with the other people or what have you, but great word of wisdom there. And really, the main thing, and just attending this discussion should be reiterate that you don't need to walk this road alone, that if you look at chat at all the resources that are just out there, and Pam and her book, and you don't need to do this on your own, like you had said in the previous slide. Okay, Joan Kaufman, and I'm not sure if you can elaborate on this, but she says, please talk about the drugs which are used to treat dementia. I know recently in the news, there was a very expensive, but apparently effective drug that was launched that got people thinking about, wow, could I take a pill to help with some of this stuff? Any thoughts on the pharmaceuticals?
So I'm not a doctor, so this is not medical advice. I will give you that disclaimer right now, but it's important for you to understand. So aducanumab is the big name for Aduhelm. And that drug is only for those people with mild cognitive impairment, not for those diagnosed with dementia. Dementia is not curable, and really the medications that are out there and it's all individual. That's the biggest challenge with this disease from a medical community perspective, is that each person's brain encounters this disease differently. So like with my mom, she lost her ability to stand. Her brain would not tell her legs to hold her weight anymore. She lost her ability to communicate. She could no longer have a conversation with me for 7 years from the time that happened, when she lost her words, to the time she passed. But we were able to communicate physically by holding hands and rubbing shoulders and hugging. And I would talk to her, but she couldn't speak to me. And that is an extreme case of Alzheimer's. But a lot of people are still talkative. You may not understand them, or they may remember things very differently than you do. Don't argue with them. But the drugs help slow down the progression, maybe. Depends on your individual, depends on where the disease is attacking the brain. And so it's a big maybe with medications, but the newest drug is only for those with mild cognitive impairment. It is not for those who have been diagnosed.
Yeah, which is, I think that's one of the things that is very, all those families and individuals that are out there, and they're suffering in the more challenging stages. Yes. But if we can have a drug out there that can minimize that at those early stages, or make those early stages last longer, that would be wonderful. Yeah. Let's see. Michael asks, Pam mentioned dementia certification and herself being certified. What organizations offer evidence-based training?
evidence-based training, meaning that you are having practical skills in that. I
Yeah,
guess I'm unclear
yeah, I'm
what.
wondering if this, like, because I know that, like, well, Michael, if you can elaborate on that more, we can follow up on that.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm thinking along the lines of, yes, practical skills is what he was
Well, and so
saying.
that's what TIPA Snow's training is really about, it is evidence-based. It is something that is the practices that she has. So I focus on helping the family members understand the journey and work through the emotions, the decisions that they have to make. But TIPA is focused on, if you're in this situation, this is what you need to do. These are the actions you need to take. And that's based on her over 20 years of experience. I tend to also have conversations with family members because I am a certified dementia practitioner. I'm also certified in dementia care, and I'm a certified senior advisor. So between all of those certifications and 14 years of living it daily, I think that you get used to some of the things that can help. On the flip side, honestly, and I'm so happy that you're asking about certifications, but it's really important for professional caregivers to go through TIPA Snows. And am not affiliated with TIPA. I just have watched her and her training. And I think what she has is good. Honestly, there's other certification bodies out there for dementia care, but not as many as you would think. With 6.2 million people being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, you'd think that there would be, some sort of a major faction that does that. But I'm not aware of anyone but really TIPA and a few other organizations, which aren't coming to mind right now, for that. But the important thing is so in reading my book, you're going to learn what you don't know. So part of learning is, you don't know what you don't know, then you do know what you don't know, then you learn, what you know, but now you've become a master of that information, you can move forward. So we were kind of in that stage. And Steve, if you don't mind, can I share my slide about what this journey typically looks like?
Oh, no, absolutely. Jump on that.
All right, let me grab that. So the journey typically looks like, and I'm really glad that you guys are asking these questions, because that means that you're thinking ahead of the game. And my mission is to make sure that we educate as many people as possible to understand where this journey goes and to be prepared for it earlier on. Because ultimately, you start to see behaviors like, your loved one loses their glasses, can't remember a name, they start to have some issues. And this timeline goes from green to red, and most of it is orange and red with some yellow as well, but very little green. And so, we as loved ones write it off to, oh, you're just senile, you're just old, or you just weren't paying attention, and we dismiss it. But then the loved one starts wearing the same clothes, they have personal hygiene issues, they stop going out, so lack of socialization, they lose weight, they become a fall risk. Now the family starts to get a little bit involved. But by then, and this happened with my mom, she got lost in the mall. My dad couldn't find his way home. He was missing for 3.5 hours, scared the heck out of me. They can't recall either names of people or family or friends by name. They know who they are if they're talking, but they can't place the name. So they couldn't tell you where they live or who they're with. And medications is a huge issue. So this is the typical journey. Unfortunately, when I talk with people in placement who help families find the right spot for their loved one, they say that easily 70 to 80% of the people that they meet are in this in this situation where at the very bottom, the family finally says, okay, some bad things have happened or a fall has happened. let's talk with our PCP, then we'll talk to the neurologist, you get a diagnosis, panic sets in, and you're looking for a memory care community almost immediately for that weekend. And the journey doesn't have to be that way. If you have these conversations now, like, what kind of care do you want? I want to stay in my home as long as possible. Great. That means that can be very expensive, especially these days with caregiver shortages. So, and just to give you an idea so that right now in-home care, and it would have to be 24/7, because someone who's in the mid stages of Alzheimer's specifically can wander at night. And so your house has to be prepared for that. And typically, if they have to use the bathroom or something like that, you want that caregiver to be able to help them. And that's between $100,000 and $120,000 per year. Care communities, memory care typically runs somewhere around $60,000 to $80,000 a year. And there's more stimulation and more engagement in that environment as well. It's just that the person isn't living at home. So there's a lot of places to go from that particular launching point, but I wanted to share that because it saddens me deeply that there's so many people out there who are not processing the need to get these individuals help and care.
Yeah, no, it's really challenging. And actually, Martha has a question that relates to COVID, but before I read that, I've talked to several families during COVID whose parents were, being cared for appropriately. Everything was going great in a community setting. And then all of the horror stories popped into the news. And obviously, the precautions of visitors and things like that, and pulled mom and dad out to take care of them with dementia at home. And they quickly discovered and remembered how challenging that was in the past, and brought them back in. It really, the at-home care is very challenging for spouses and individuals, but
especially with the depending on the level of dementia. And this is a multi-year journey. So maybe you can have your loved one, the first couple of years, with you, or you live in their home. But then when things get to mid-stage, they really need to have 24/7 eyes on care. And with COVID, so we have to bear in mind, yes, the concept of lockdown and isolation was done for their own well-being, but here's the catch. If a year later, what we've learned is that there's other ways to help them get stimulation while they're in their own rooms. So COVID taught us a lot of different things. And unfortunately, all of those lessons came at us rapid fire. So we will not, for the most part, from what I know of our communities here in Phoenix, they have a whole different strategy for if there were a time when they needed to do quarantining again or lockdown. Family members have to remember it's not about them, it's about their loved ones' well-being. And there's lots of ways with, video and phone and, windows. So a lot more communities are being built with windows facing out and not just windows facing in, just in case, because that way at least you can communicate through the window, but you won't be physically there. So we've come up with lots of really interesting ways, tools to handle a situation like COVID moving forward. We were totally unprepared for it in so many ways. But definitely in the senior living environment.
And this is, you sort of already given a few solutions to Martha's question, which says, with COVID, what recommendations do you have for parents with dementia and assisted living, which is once again under quarantine? And you sort of talked about these communities. I mean, this is top of their list now, is like, how are we going to enable families to interact with mom and dad? The positive thing about COVID is that there was really only two ways for families to interact with their loved ones before COVID. And it was calling them on the phone, and it was showing up at the community. And I think that we've become a little more, much more well equipped to interact on a daily basis using technology. That being said, somebody with dementia, the technology doesn't always work as well as
Well, and that's what the caregivers are there for. And that was the other thing, is nobody had thought that they had to train the caregivers. Now, you know, it depends on what generation they are, but helping them be able to, you know, provide a tablet. I know the communities, some of the communities I work with would provide a tablet, and they'd be able to do video, and they'd be able to do different types of games and that type of thing. But we also have to remember that we're not talking about somebody who is having a physical issue. We're talking about somebody who has an issue with their brain and cognitive ability. So they don't understand what COVID is. They don't understand why they have to wear a mask. They also, and I hate to tell the family members this, but depending on what stage they're at, like I would visit my mom, she'd be asleep. So I would just hold her hand for like 30 minutes and then I would leave. And we as family members carry this huge amount of guilt when we visit. Like, when should we visit? How long should we stay? How frequently should we visit? And one of my clients was gone for a week with taking his daughter across country to college. And he came back to his mom in memory care. And he put his arms around her and said, "Mom, I missed you so much. You know, I'm sorry I was gone for the week." And she said, "What are you talking about? You were just here yesterday." So what we don't understand is that we view the world from an extremely cognitively capable viewpoint. They don't. So they may be sleeping and you want to do a phone call. That's about how you perceive their need, not actually what they need. So there's also what it brought to the forefront, Steve, I think, is just how different dementia is and how dramatically different we as relatives and family and friends need to understand the difference with dementia, and that their loved one may need a different type of interaction, and that we shouldn't necessarily be so demanding. Well, we want to see our loved one. Well, she's sleeping right now. Well, you know, but we drove all the way here. It's not about you, it's about her. And if she's sleeping, leave her alone, let her sleep. So we have to think about this disease very differently. And I think we're just at the very beginning of that journey, because it is a very different disease.
Great. Okay, lots of good questions coming here. We'll get through these. Okay, Robert says, any suggestions for communication cards or the like for someone with early Lewy body dementia? I'm working with a hospice patient who can comprehend what people say, but struggles to find the words to express her thoughts. What I have seen for communication cards seems very basic for people with severe memory loss.
That's a good question. I would have to give that a little bit more thought than the spontaneous answer. But in how we communicate with loved ones, no matter what type of dementia that they have, the question is how much comprehension is coming. And then, of course, I had an example of a woman who was panicking because her mother was saying, "I have surgery tomorrow, I have surgery tomorrow." And she was holding her stomach. And I said, "Well," and she said, "I kept making notions, no surgery." And I said, "Okay, let's take a deep breath." So it's quite possible, if she is pointing to her stomach, that she was hungry, that she had a tummy ache, right? Didn't feel well. But the only word that could come out was surgery. So what it turns into, at least in my experience and with my clients and what we've tried, because it really is trial and error, it would be wonderful if I could give you one piece of advice and it would be the answer to all of the questions around the same topic. But with any type of dementia, it's really unique to the individual. So the first thing we start off with is guessing, frankly. Struggling with communication. They're trying to access their memory. So you have to try the 90 different ways to say something to see if that's what they're trying to and what they're trying to communicate. To me, the best way to communicate with someone is through visuals. So that could be a friend of mine's aunt had dementia, and she said she can't tell me what vegetables she needs. And I said, go to the store and get a kid's sticker book, and they'll have vegetables, and there's, the ABCs, all that kind of stuff. And I said, grab, so she can look at something and go, I know that's lettuce. I don't remember its name. So that picks the picture out and put it on the piece of paper so that her niece could go get the groceries. And so their best bet for all types of dementia is visuals. I always tell people when their loved one may visit their home, or when they're progressing with dementia, to put a picture of a toilet on the door where the toilet is, because the closet looks just like a toilet. There's a lot of messiness in the brain, and you may think a closet looks like a closet, but to someone with dementia, it's a door, and that you go to the door and then you do what you do. And so it's a very unfortunate outcome of not being able to process a house layout or an environment, a room layout. So having pictures of objects is probably the best thing I could communicate to you for a tool for them.
And Robert, it sounds like what I would, based on what Pam is just saying, is I would just throw a dart at the communication cards, just the set that you think is best, but then also have on hand, scratch paper, a whiteboard, other tools, sticker book, as Pam had said, because at the end of the day, I think the reason that Robert is sort of looking at these communication cards is, oh geez, is that everybody is unique. And then with dementia, that just gets even more customized to what's going on in someone's brain. Yes. So I think it's a combination of sort of homemade plus what you can get out there to make it quick, to sort of flip something over and it's like, oh, bathroom, but then.
And the thing about the book is that they can flip through it in points, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can get a book that has a variety of things, as opposed to just the communications cards, it's like, well, they could flip through them if they wanted to, but then a page of graphics might help them put things together more easily.
Okay, let's see. Joan Rubin Crit says, she's referencing the National Council for Dementia Practitioners. And I'm going to drop that website here into the
NCCDP.
Into the chat. And then Gloria Gaddy says, help me with some of my calls I have been receiving this week related to the cost and care. For example, I have residents in high-end assisted living who pay dearly. However, the care is at an all-time low. I've visited for myself and I see it going downhill. What suggestions do you have to help? I remain open for change and I believe there's something that can be done. And, Gloria, this labor shortage that we've got, I mean, it was hard before COVID. It's even harder now. But Pam, I'm curious if you've got any ideas or suggestions. And it's horrible. Like my suggestion to families was always, as a family member, you can supplement the care, build your network coming by and popping in and helping out. But when we go through these shutdowns, that's not an option anymore. And then it gets even more complicated when you can't go in and see with your own eyes that mom is doing okay.
All right. And it depends on what part of the country you're in. Like right now, there's been a few quarantines and just a few care communities here in Phoenix, but they're all unique as far as what their policies are and what they're following and what they're not following, whether they're private or public companies. So with the assisted living, typically the way they're set up is that you purchase services based, and that certain services accumulate up to a certain number of points. When you hit that point limit, then you move into the next level of care. So one of the things that you could do, because you emphasize the expense of the place and the high end, is to have a conversation with the director, the executive director of the community, to voice your concern, because some of this is out of their control. I hate to say it that way, but it is true. There are fewer caregivers. The people who are coming in need to be trained, but they also need to be feet on the street immediately, right? So that's why I emphasize dementia certification, making sure that your caregivers are dementia certified, whether they're in a community or in-home care, is that it's an entirely different conversation with someone. And if you try to push somebody with dementia to do something, they will fight you. And you have to know what words to use. You have to know how to position basically any activity that they don't want to do in a way that's desirable. And that takes skill. So we've got a deficit of skill set. We've got a deficit of staffing. And so, I would have a conversation. Now, this is just me. But I would have a conversation with that executive director and say, these are my concerns. And then the solution in my mind is that because they still have caregivers coming in, Steve, I think that any professional caregiver, so in-home care can send a caregiver in, even though the place is on quarantine. Again, this is so unique to every community. You would have to propose it. If it weren't allowed, I would propose it to the executive director to say, I use, right at home caregiving, and I want their dementia certified caregiver to come in and spend time with my mom or my dad and help them. However, I'm not going to pay for your caregiver and my caregiver, so I would like some cost relief. These are businesses, and so we need to feel comfortable as family members being able to have that type of conversation with them. It is not carte blanche. You can have these conversations with care communities, especially these days, and talk about what are the solutions. How do we provide the best care for your loved one?
Yeah, great tips. But yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned executive director, and actually Teresa in chat says, what qualifications do executive directors have to run memory care communities? There are it varies by state,
Yes.
licensed administrators, what have you. But that's a great question to ask, Teresa, when you're looking at places, because one thing about executive directors, I've often said that if there's one person that you would like to talk to when you visit a community for your mom and dad, it's the executive director.
Mhm.
They're the captain of the ship, and generally their culture falls down to the lowest level employee. And not that there's a low level, that to all employees, I should say. So that's good. The Gloria says, thank you for that. And then Christy says, I've heard the more dementia patient sleeps, the more their brain loses the ability to function. Is this true? Sometimes it seems like my mom would sleep all day.
So I've never heard that. And actually making sure that they get enough sleep will remove behaviors. And so sleep and how your brain functions have nothing to do with each other from a dementia perspective. Sleep actually lets the brain restore, erase the things that have happened that aren't relevant, and reprioritize. And that's how it works in a functioning brain. That's a really simplistic way to say it. But sleep is definitely the most important thing, and allowing them to sleep is fine. The key, though, is to make sure that they're still eating and hydrating. So sleep should not interfere with either of those things. We want them to be able to do some sort of engagement activity as well each day. But if they're sleeping a lot, then, a lot meaning all the rest of the day is spent sleeping, that's okay. Ultimately, their body is shutting down, and they're tired, and it's exhausting, but it's not going to make matters worse. So don't worry about that. It's very typical. It's a very typical thing.
Yeah, and on the communities, James McDonald says, don't hesitate to stay on top of the staff in these communities that your
Yes.
parents are in. And this is not to be disparaging to the staff, but just imagine when you're caring one-on-one with your loved one in your home, how challenging that is when you've got a large population. Staying on top and finding out what's going on with your mom and offering assistance and seeing if there's things that you could do differently
Yeah.
and having that dialogue, making sure the staff knows that you're concerned about mom and that you're there to support her. And again,
because they're your support team.
yeah, my heart breaks for all the people living in communities that don't have a support network and don't have loved ones that are regularly checking in. It's not, again, the fact of the matter is that staff has to priority. And if they know that you're calling and that you're concerned, they're going to hopefully focus on your loved one.
Well, and I actually have a story about that, about the hesitancy. So I was telling one of my clients, I said, find out what your mom's weight is, because she was undernourished and dehydrated when she went into the memory care community. And because she was staying at home and eating watermelon and Jello, because that's all she wanted. And that's all her husband would feed her because that's what she wanted. So he was trying to appease her. And so how much does she weigh? How much is she drinking each day? How much of her plate is she finishing? And she said, well, who do I ask those questions of? And I said, well, the director of nursing should be able to, to look at the log of your mom's daily activity and tell you, but also the med tech might be able to, or a caregiver. That's, depends on the care community. And she said, well, I don't want to disturb them while they're working. And I said, well, then you will never disturb them because they're always working. I said, think of the people there as your support staff. You're the CEO and you're responsible for this loved one. And so this organization is there to support you. That doesn't mean that you bother them all the time, but being able to ask for that type of information, build relationships with everyone, including the executive director, the med tech, the director of nursing. You should be meeting with those people quarterly, either on Zoom, in a phone call, or in person, to talk about, well, what are we going to do this quarter? What observations have you seen while I'm not here? Those are all part of the experience. And it's also something that doesn't seem to be very well communicated when you move your loved one in, because everybody's trying to get organized and it's a bit of a chaotic experience, or certainly can be. So make sure that you're emphasizing a process for communication, what your expectations are, and stay in touch on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you, Steve.
I'm looking at the clock. We got 3 minutes to 1. Oop. We're going to keep on going, folks, but I know some of you jump off at the hour. But I want to go through a few more questions, address some of the things that are in chat. Pam, we want to, people have been asking for your contact information. And then also somebody asked, is the only way that people can work with you just buying the book, or is there a way that you can consult with people one-on-one or with groups?
So you can reach me at Pam. I'm going to put this in here.
I dropped it in. Pam,
oh, you did? Okay, great.
Yep, I dropped
Pam at it'snotthatsimple.com. I work with families one-on-one. I do speaking engagements, obviously, and work to try to educate as many family members as possible. So I do this as a profession, not just from a speaking perspective, but also I'm working one-on-one to build out either the 8 stepping stone plan, or if there's a particular stepping stone like care options, or what questions do I ask a care community, or what questions do I ask our doctor? Because a lot of doctors, only 16% of doctors in the United States actually do any cognitive testing on a person over the age of 65.
Somebody had there's so many, and I'm going to copy all of this chat it'll be posted with the recording, but somebody had referenced in chat somewhere early on in the discussion a comment about physicians. Let's see. good question comment came in. Another factor of oversleeping is medication. Facilities
Yes.
have been known to over medicate.
Some facilities, so the way that ends up happening is the facility isn't over medicating. It's the medical director of the community is making an observation and solving a problem. So the question is, what problem are you solving with that medication? So anxiety and depression seem to be the top two issues within memory care, and specifically that they're both nature part of the disease. So it wouldn't be unusual to have your loved one be on an anti-anxiety medication or an antidepressant. Where we start to get really concerned is when they're on antipsychotics and on behavioral to solve a behavior problem, because, and that's again the questions, the reason why we don't want to move your loved one once they move into a dementia or a memory care community or home, simply because it's really hard on them to make the transition. So ask the right questions early on when you're choosing. That's again, planning is better than reacting. And when you do that, you're going to want to ask, okay, let's play a scenario of, dad being combative. How would you solve that problem? And find out what they're, well, we talk with the doctor, and what would the doctor do? Be sure that you talk to the medical director, by the way, whoever's the physician in charge of that community. Make sure that that person's on your list of people to interview, including the executive director. Don't just talk to the salesperson. Their job is to fill the bed. So you want to talk to the staff that will be caring for your loved one and ask some difficult questions so that you make the right decisions and you don't end up on this drug path of 9 different medications. There's lots of ways to address individual situations, and in some cases those medications are appropriate, but they're not. It's the medical director that's making those decisions.
Great.
Most likely,
man. Once again, another amazing discussion, and I've been glancing at the chat that everybody can see. Great conversations, great ideas and suggestions going on in there. I'm going to copy all of this. We got the recording. We got Pam's contact information. Pam, is it okay if I also add a link to the PowerPoint?
Oh, if you're going to have that, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you sent it to me. So I'll put it underneath the recording so that perfect. People could access
yes,
that.
That's fine.
And
actually, let me send you the PDF on that, Steve.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Or I can save it as a PDF and then put it up that way, which I always do that. So this has been awesome. I think we just scratched the surface. We're definitely going to have you back on again. And I thank everybody in the audience for such another engaging discussion. And we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you guys for all of your questions and for participating. It's a speaker's dream, believe me, to be able to interact more with the audience. So I really do appreciate that. And thank you, Steve, for all that you do. And with the Positive Aging Source Book and the proaging.com website, thank you so much. And if you guys need any more information about me before you reach out to me, go to alzheimersfamilyconsulting.com. All one word, alzheimersfamilyconsulting.com.
I love it. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Take care. Bye, everyone.